Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and thank you so much for watching. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I made this Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles themed cake, so let's get right into it. I'm starting out with a 6-inch cake that I've already iced and covered in fondant. If you need to see how to do that in depth, I will link those videos below. I added a little bit of brown to some white fondant and rolled that out, and I'm going to be covering my board and just trimming away the excess. For the pizza, I have some red buttercream that I'm going to be spreading all over my board using my spatula. All of the materials and recipes in this video will be linked below as well. I spread that out pretty thin over the board. I didn't want to have any gaps, and you can see that I left a little bit of border around the edge. I rolled out more of that light brown fondant into a really long snaky shape, and then placed that down on the edge of my board, just using my fingers to give it a little bit of texture. For the cheese, I grated white and yellow candy melts and then placed that all over. And then to make my pizza crust look a little more crusty, I took some brown color dust on a fluffy brush and just put that all over, making it darker in some areas just to give it some more dimension. You can add whatever toppings you'd like to your pizza. For pepperoni, I have some red fondant that I added a little bit of black to, and I'm cutting a bunch of circles out with a piping tip. And then on top of those circles, I have some white food coloring gel, and I'm just dotting that on ever so slightly. For some olives, I'm rolling out some black fondant. I personally don't like olives at all, but I thought they would look really good visually. So I'm cutting out a bunch of circles with my piping tip, and then with a smaller circular piping tip, I'm just punching out the middles. I placed the pepperoni and the olives on my pizza sporadically and just cut some of the pepperonis in half and placed them right up against the cake. I added a little bit of water to the top edge of my cake, and with a long strip of gray fondant, I went all the way around. I didn't quite make it, so I just added another little piece just to make sure that your seams are clean. For my main sewer tunnel, I added a circle of black fondant just so I knew where to place the rest of my decorations. And then I started going around my cake with more strips of gray fondant. There was no rhyme or reason to this. I was just kind of creating like a grid. Using that same piping tip I used to punch out the center of my olives, I added these little circles all around those strips. And then with my X-Acto knife, I marked a line in each to make them look like screws, bolts. I'm not really sure, but it looked good. I added another thicker strip of gray fondant going all the way around the opening of my sewer tunnel, just making sure that the seam was at the bottom. I rolled out a long strip of gray fondant, and then using a brick embosser, I just impressioned that. And then I used a circle cutter to help me keep a perfectly round shape. I let that dry for a little bit and added it to the top of my cake, just holding it in place with a little bit of water. I cut out another larger circle of gray fondant about the size of the circle added to the top of the cake, and with my X-Acto knife, I'm just etching in a pattern. You can do whatever you want. You just want to make sure it looks kind of like a grate. I cut a strip of gray fondant into 4 equal squares. I find this is the best way when you need to make text by hand, just to make sure everything is roughly the same size. And then looking at the logo, I did my best to match it. I placed that in the center of my grate and then set that aside to dry. To make the pipes coming out of the cake, I rolled out snakies of gray fondant and then just bent them into shape and trimmed them down to the size I wanted. And again, I let those dry completely before I tried to add them to the cake. I mixed a little bit of silver luster dust with some lemon extract and brushed that all over that grid pattern that I laid down. I also brushed that over the grate and the piping. I did not show that, but I waited until both of those pieces were dry. To create each of the characters, I'm starting out with a ball of green fondant, and using my pinky, I'm just indenting about halfway up, just trying to bring out the mouth and nose area and setting back where the eyes are going to be. With my X-Acto knife, I cut out the shape of the mouth, and then using my fondant tool, I pressed that in to create a little cavity and also indented either side at the tops for some dimples. I rolled out this little lemony shape of black fondant and pressed that into the mouth, just making sure I got into all the corners using my fondant tool and then smoothing it down with my finger. Each turtle has a different banner color. I'm making Raphael, so I have some red here. I have a strip of red fondant that I've wrapped around the head and just cut a seam at the back. With my fondant tool, I've marked in a couple lines on either side just to give it a little more texture to make it look like fabric. And then with my balling tool, I'm indenting 2 holes for the eyes. I added 2 balls of white fondant to fill in those holes. And then with 2 smaller balls of black fondant, I'm adding those for the pupils. And I used some white food gel coloring for the catchlight, but you could also do 2 little balls of white fondant. With some lighter green fondant that I added a little bit of yellow food coloring gel to, I just rolled out this haphazard shape and placed it down, making it look like it's coming out of my sewer thingy. I used my fingers to give it some texture, just being really careful that you're not morphing the shape of the piece of fondant going around that black hole. I pressed a little piece of skewer into each of my pipes and put those into the cake. And then with another piece of skewer, I put that going into the top of my pipe and just pressed that gently into my cake board so that it would stick in place. With more of that light green fondant, I wrapped it around the skewer and made sure that the piece for the bottom was really pressed into the board because that's going to help the bottom of that skewer stay in place. I added some of my scrap green fondant into the center of the circle on top of my cake, and then I'm going to be inserting the heads right into that. I have the 4 turtles and I've put a skewer into each piece, and that's going to help them stay in place. For their little hands, I have these little teardrops of green fondant, and I'm just marking in 2 lines and placing that on the very end so it looks like they're kind of reaching out. I've attached a skewer to my grate using a strip of black fondant, and I'm placing that right behind my circle into the cake, just high enough so that you can still see the logo. And this was the final result, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you did, and subscribe to my channel for new videos every week. If you have any suggestions for cake themes, please leave those in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.